All right, here we go. We're starting to get some attendees trickling in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this Friday. It's probably Friday for most of us, might be Saturday for a few of us. So
I
if
think
the
it's
sun is out,
Saturday in Australia.
yeah, it probably, and
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
And so if the sun is out, welcome. If the moon is out, welcome. Some of you I know joined pretty late in your day or very early in your day. So thank you for choosing to spend an hour with us. So the first thing that I would like to hear is put a yes in the chat if you can hear me and if you can see me. Excellent. Next thing I'd love to see in the chat is your location and then something meaningful that happened this week, either that happened to you or that you were able to do. Put something meaningful that happened to you in the chat this week. Houston, India, Colorado Springs, Richmond, Gainesville, Seattle, San Juan, Puerto Rico, Berkshire, England. I love seeing this. Every time it gets me. Philippines,
Belgium,
Tucson,
Italy,
Lisbon. Oh, I
Munich,
love it. It's fantastic. This is great.
Calgary.
Anders is on vacation this week. Love to hear it. Veronica saw a great example of a leader not creating psychological safety for a group.
Okay. Well,
Sometimes that's just as important as seeing the good things. I felt I was
well,
heard on an important matter. Thanks, Tim. That's
Mexico
fantastic.
City. Nice.
Matt, I was able to support some friends who really needed a safe space to process. That's a big deal. Thank you for
Wow.
doing that, Matt.
Yeah, that's good.
Ellen took yesterday off and did 70 miles on the Skyline Drive in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Oh boy.
We wish we were with you.
No kidding. I sure wish. I was the MC for Kaiser Permanente's virtual celebration for 20-year employees. Super fun.
Nice.
Brianna, very cool.
Nice.
20 years. You see that less and less now. That's
I know.
amazing.
I know.
Excellent.
Oh, we've
Well,
got France. We've got Norway. Wow. Bonjour. And I
bonjour.
know I don't say that very well.
Tim does speak Korean, though. If you didn't
Yes.
know that, Tim does speak Korean.
안녕하십니까 for all of those who speak Korean out there.
Probably less than the majority, but if
Yep.
there are any out there, I'd love to see that in
And
the chat.
Junior speaks Spanish, so say hello in Spanish, Junior.
Buenos dias.
There we go.
Yeah, if you speak Spanish, I'd love to see an email in Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got people trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get started today. Thank you again so much for being with us. I know that many of you come back every other week for these webinars. And so for those of you that are returning, welcome back. For those of you for whom it's your first time, welcome.
Hey, look, hey, we can't miss this one.
Yeah.
I had a Skype call with my 92-year-old mom in New Zealand.
Love it. Very cool. The benefits of technology.
Yep.
That's really neat.
This is great.
Okay, so yeah, welcome to the Leader Factor Network. For those of you who are new, we host webinars usually every other week, every 3 weeks on the topics of psychological safety, emotional intelligence, general leadership. We are a leadership development consultancy and training company. And so we work primarily in those fields of EQ and psychological safety, among other things, but that's our primary focus. And so welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about 140 ways to increase psychological safety. Many of you are familiar with the behavioral guide from the 4 stages. And so if you have that handy, that is something that we'll be using today, and we'll provide an opportunity for everybody to download a full copy of the behavioral guide. Is really a practical guide to improve psychological safety. So one of the things that I want to mention is that the 4 stages of psychological safety is based on this book by the same name, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, published earlier this year by Dr. Clark, who's our host, who I will introduce shortly. One of the things that I would love to see is if you have read the book, please leave a review on Amazon. We're close to that 100 review mark, and we'd love to push over that this weekend. If those of you who have read the book wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on the book, we would appreciate that very much. That helps the content get out to the world. And this is something that the world needs right now, as we all know, psychological safety. So the author of the book and our presenter today, Dr. Timothy Clark, he is the CEO of Leader Factor. He's an Oxford-trained social scientist who's been doing research in this area and instrument design for several decades. He was a Fulbright and British research scholar, and is also the author of several other books and other instruments as well. So with that, I will let Tim take it away. We've got Ben in the chat. So if you have questions, I will be monitoring the chat as well. We'll have some important links in there, and feel free to engage in the chat. We don't discourage that at all. Go ahead and ask questions, engage with each other. It's a beautiful place. There's a lot of rich content that happens in the chat, so please engage in there. So with that, Tim, take it away.
Let's do it. Thanks, Junior, and welcome everyone. We're excited to be with you and spend an hour with you today. So today we're going to talk about the behavioral guide. The behavioral guide is a free resource. It's a downloadable free resource, and it's a practical how-to guide that is a companion to the book. It's also a companion to the 4 stages team survey. And what it includes are concrete behaviors that you can implement for each of the 4 stages of psychological safety. We're going to dive into each of those stages and many examples of concrete behaviors that you can implement. So let me begin with this. There's an exploding interest around the world in the concept of psychological safety. Why is that? Well, I think for at least two reasons. Number one, there's a moral force that's exerting itself very strongly on organizations that's driving inclusion. And that is primarily a response to social injustice. The other force at work in communities and in organizations is the competitive force. The competitive force is driving innovation, and it is a response to market turbulence, which has only increased in this pandemic environment. And so because of both of these forces exerting themselves so strongly on organizations, there is this exploding interest in psychological safety. All right, so let's start with a couple of polling questions. So Ben, let's bring down polling question number 1, if we can. Here's the first question that I would like all of you to answer. In a team setting, which of these 4 activities do most team members want to do first? So go ahead and answer that question, please.
That should be up on your screen, so make sure that you do it in the poll window, not the chat.
Yep.
I'll let these come in for about 10 more seconds, and then we'll close it out. So be sure to get your response in there. By the way, this entire webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to you after the live session. Usually on Monday, we'll send this out. That includes the chat and everything you're seeing and hearing. So just so you know. Okay, let's go ahead and close this out, and I will share the results.
Great, let's check it out. Okay, here we go. So take a look at this. Of these 4 activities, now these are the 4 activities, by the way. I wasn't going to tell you at the beginning because it would bias you, but these are the 4 activities that we engage in most often in a social unit, in a team, in an organization. So far and away, the thing that most people are concerned about first is connecting with other team members, 82%. This validates the 4 stages sequence, which we're going to get into. And so I just wanted to do that polling question with you so that you can see that this is the universal pattern across the world. It doesn't matter what nation you're in. It doesn't matter your culture, your demographics. This is a universal pattern across the human species. Okay, let's go to the second polling question. Here it is.
There it goes.
In a team setting, which of these 4 activities is the highest risk? Which activity is the highest risk? Go ahead and answer this question. These are the same 4 activities, right? So which one carries the highest risk?
Believe it or not, most of you agree on this one. I'll give this one about 10 more seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, I always think this is interesting. We've done a lot of survey research with these particular questions, and the results are always very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this one, and I will share the results. You should see those on your screen now.
There we go. So does this surprise you? So 89% of you say that challenging the status quo is the highest risk activity. And again, these data, your response patterns are consistent with what we are measuring worldwide. So again, this is a universal pattern across the world. The highest risk activity in a social unit is challenging the status quo. This is the dominant pattern, empirical pattern across the world. It's not our opinion. It is the empirical pattern across the world. Okay, so I want you to reflect on those two patterns because based on this research, well, these questions and other related questions, that is how we were able to excavate the concept of psychological safety and discover the 4 stages. It's not somebody's opinion. It's based on scientific research. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the 4 stages, and then we're going to talk about how to apply the behavioral guide to the 4 stages and get very practical. Okay, so let's do that. So let's begin with psychological safety as a concept. What is it? Let's begin with this. When humans go into a social setting, what's the first thing that they do? Well, 81% of you said the first thing we're worried about is connecting with other team members. And so what humans do is we engage in threat detection. That's the first thing that we do. We observe, we perceive, we're trying to figure out if this social setting is safe or unsafe. If we determine that it's safe, we offer an offensive response. What does that mean? That means we engage, we lean in, we participate with enthusiasm, we release our discretionary efforts. On the other hand, if we think it's unsafe, if we come to that conclusion, we offer a defensive response. A defensive response means that we manage personal risk. We're protecting ourselves. And that makes sense, right? Because we're adaptable creatures. What is it that we're looking for to determine if it's safe or unsafe? Here's what we found in our research. This is what people are concerned about. They're trying to figure out the answer to one question. Is vulnerability rewarded or punished? That's what we're looking around to see. That's what we're trying to discover. And so we watch and we observe and we watch and we observe. And we're looking for people to engage in acts of vulnerability. And then we want to know what happens next. That's what humans do in social settings. So based on that pattern, we can define very clearly, we can give a definition for psychological safety. Here's the definition. It's only 5 words. Psychological safety is an environment of rewarded vulnerability. That's the definition. If you engage in acts of vulnerability, you will be rewarded, not punished. So this is our definition that we use worldwide. So let me ask you, what are some acts of vulnerability that we frequently, commonly engage in social settings, on teams, in organizations? Go to your chat box and put them in. What are these acts of vulnerability that we look for, that we observe to determine if it's psychologically safe or not?
Speaking up in meetings, Robert asking for help, Carrie saying, I don't know, admitting error, admit to a mistake, owning
Giving
your
feedback.
mistakes, giving feedback, disagreement, sharing emotions. Can I ask a stupid question?
Yep.
Wow, the chat's popping here. Accountability, challenging the boss, calling out a bad concept, being yourself, taking accountability for failure. We're getting that one quite a bit.
Discussing racial injustice.
Yeah.
That's an act of vulnerability.
100%.
Right? Yeah. Great example.
Use of humor. I've seen that backfire too.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Expressing emotion like disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one, right?
Yeah.
Introducing yourself to an established group. Guys, is that not vulnerability?
That's
just
excellent.
saying, hi, my name's Junior.
Yeah.
That alone can be an act of vulnerability.
Yeah. I'm the new person.
Yeah.
Guarding healthy gender boundaries. That's a good one.
Yeah. Being yourself.
Being yourself. Okay. Fantastic.
These are
So
great.
these are acts of vulnerability that we engage in every day. We're trying to figure out if they're rewarded or punished. If they are rewarded, we have psychological safety. If we don't, then we don't. But of course, it's a matter of degree. So let's talk about this. When vulnerability is punished, at least three things happen. Number one, these experiences, they activate the pain centers of the brain. Number two, they trigger the self-censoring instinct. We start to change our behavior. And three, it shifts us to a defensive mode of performance. When we're playing defense, we're now preoccupied with three things: personal risk management, self-preservation, and loss avoidance. That's what we're doing. We're preoccupied with those things. So we can't give our full creative and productive capacity to the team. We're taking part of it and we're spending it doing these things, right? So part of that gets wasted if we don't have psychological safety. Let me give you some examples. Take a look at these questions. Junior, do you want to call any of them out or?
I do. So here are a few. Have you ever felt excluded in a social setting? Have you ever had someone steal credit for something you did? Have you ever been rudely interrupted in a meeting? Have you ever been publicly shamed or made fun of? Have you ever been punished for making an honest mistake?
Yeah, these are common. Let me ask you a question in the chat box. When was the last time one of these happened to you? So go ahead and respond to that question.
Today,
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 yesterday,
yesterday, this
this
morning,
morning, right? Every day. Wow.
yesterday, but it's just after 5 a.m. today. Give it an hour, right?
Yeah. So everyone, I hope that you'll realize that these breaches of psychological safety, these instances in which your vulnerability is punished, these are more common than rare, unfortunately.
Simone says, "Why do you think I'm refilling my wine?"
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that we can all acknowledge, we can all agree that we've got work to do. We've got work to do in our social units, in our organizations, on our teams. We have work to do. So let's talk about how the 4 stages framework works based on this worldwide research that we've done. Here's how it works. Psychological safety is a function of respect, which you see on the vertical axis, and permission, which you see on the horizontal axis. It is a progression that works through 4 stages. Stage 1 is inclusion safety. Inclusion safety is the foundation. It means I feel included, I feel accepted, I have a sense of belonging. Why is that the first stage? Well, you demonstrated it in the research that we did, because 81% of the human race wants to be included. That's the first thing they're worried about. So it comes first in the sequence. That's not somebody's opinion. It's an empirical pattern. Stage 2 is learner safety. Once we feel included, the next natural stage of human needs is to learn. So that means we feel free and able to engage in the learning process, ask questions, give and receive feedback, experiment, make mistakes. And we won't be marginalized. We won't be embarrassed for doing that. That's stage 2. After stage 2 comes stage 3, contributor safety. Now notice the sequence. Humans, once we learn, we have a natural instinct to use what we have learned, to apply our knowledge and skills and experience. Therefore, contributor safety is the next natural stage. Now we come to the final stage, the culminating stage, which is challenger safety. Challenger safety means that you feel free and able to challenge the status quo without retribution, retaliation, without jeopardizing your personal standing or reputation. Now, that's not an easy thing to do. So you'll notice two things about the 4 stages. One, as you move through the 4 stages, you're following the pattern of natural human needs. 2, you are also following a pattern of escalating vulnerability. By the time you get to stage 4, and we're talking about challenging the status quo, you have climbed a ladder of vulnerability and you're at the top rung. And you said it yourself, right? The riskiest thing to do is to challenge the status quo. So that's why that comes at the top. That is stage 4. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's keep going. Now, there's a couple of failure patterns. Here's the first failure pattern. Think about the 4 stages as a bowling lane. You want to keep your ball in the lane. If you go into the gutter up and to the left, on the left side, this is paternalism. Notice the combination. Paternalism means relatively high respect with relatively low permission. In other words, I'm a helicopter parent. I love you, but don't touch anything, right? This is what paternalism means. Paternalistic leaders do not understand leadership. They do not understand that they must empower other people. And so they stunt their growth and progress by micromanaging them. Now, they may be well-intentioned and they could be very good, benevolent people. They simply don't understand the nature of leadership. And so they exhibit a paternalistic pattern. So that's one pattern. The other failure pattern is exploitation. Exploitation is the opposite, where respect is relatively low, permission is relatively high. Exploitation means I want the value that you are able to create, but I don't value you. I don't value your inherent intrinsic worth as a human being. That is exploitation. I want to extract the value from you. Okay, here's a question for the chat box for all of you. What are some common patterns of exploitation that we see in social units, on teams, in organizations? Go to the chat box. Let's see what kind of patterns you can identify.
Karen says taking credit. Elizabeth, same thing. Taking credit for my ideas. Taking credit. Wow. Holy smokes. Look at taking credit in the chat. There's like 20 of you saying this. Passing the buck. Whenever your boss says leverage your ...
Okay.
Jumping to negative conclusions, hogging the limelight, asking for free consulting, abdication, expected to be on demand, making me feel appreciated and valued, but not letting me give input, overtaxing with work, fair weather friends, keeping wages low and expectations high. These are all good, guys.
They're really good.
Taking advantage of those who don't speak up with dumping them with work, working overtime. They don't ask about my illness. Silence after work is submitted, expecting me to agree with their opinion when it's not necessarily appropriate.
Shaming into work. Yeah.
That happens all the time, doesn't
Junior,
it?
you know, one here that I want to highlight, and this is so good, especially in the pandemic environment, expecting that I'm on demand.
Yeah.
We can take that too far. Now most of us are using the flexibility that we have, and that's a good thing, but to expect that we're 24/7 on demand, that's a tough one.
It is
And
a tough one.
I think a lot of us are running into that.
Yeah, yeah. One I like here from Colette: private praise, public silence.
Okay.
Like
that is beautiful. That is beautiful. Okay. Any other good ones?
Oh man, there are tons.
There's a ton.
Go ahead and read through them, guys.
Yeah, there's
Scroll
just
through
so
the chat
many.
and read all those.
Now here's the challenge. Here's the danger. When patterns of exploitation become normalized in an organization, that is dangerous. How many times have you seen, well, hopefully not a lot, but I have seen, as we work with organizations around the world, patterns of harassment, patterns of bullying, patterns of public shaming, patterns of manipulation that become normalized, and they sink into the culture, they sink into the DNA, and they become perpetuated norms. That's dangerous. And this is where we need help. Okay, so let's go back to the behavioral guide. How do you use the behavioral guide? We're going to take you through 6 steps. So number 1 is to complete the 4 stages team survey to measure psychological safety on your team. Get a baseline. Now, you can still use the behavioral guide if you don't do that, but you're going to have a harder time knowing exactly where you are. What is your starting point? So we recommend that you use the survey and baseline baseline your team. Understand where you're starting from. So that's step 1. Step 2, you review your results. Where are you? And then you go through each stage. While you look at your results, you identify 2 or 3 behaviors for your lowest 3 rated items. Or if you're not using the team survey, you identify 2 or 3 behaviors for each stage. So you can use the team survey. You don't have to. You can still use the behavioral guide. After you identify 2 or 3 behaviors for your lowest rated items, or for each of the 4 stages, you build an action plan using the 5P action planner. Then you implement your action plan. Then you come back and you retake the survey after 60 to 90 days.
Tim, I
Okay.
want to call out something in the chat really quick.
Yeah.
So what if you don't have a team? That's a very good question. All of the
Okay.
behaviors that we'll talk about today and that live in the behavioral guide are things that anyone can do. And one of the interesting things is that psychological safety is not just the top-down relationship. It's very much a peer-to-peer relationship as well. And psychological safety can be built from the bottom up. It can be easier to go in at the top and have it trickle down, but it would be remiss of us to not acknowledge the fact that you can build it from the ground up. So even if you're an individual contributor, these behaviors are still relevant.
That's very true. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. So this is just a screenshot of the 4 stages dashboard. If we focus in, zoom in a little bit more, part of the dashboard shows you your stages averages. So inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and challenger safety. So you know where you are. Okay. So we begin there. So let's begin. Stage 1, inclusion safety. Again, what's the definition? Inclusion safety satisfies the basic human need to be included, accepted, and belong. It means it's not expensive to be yourself. So how do you increase that on a team? Well, let us give you a summary statement on how to do that. Here's how you do it. You engage in behaviors that ask, invite, and share. Any behavior that does that, if done with the right intent, with good faith, promotes inclusion. It naturally promotes inclusion. Okay, now let's go to the behavioral guide. And we're just going to call out some examples and we can discuss these. And by the way, we would ask you to offer up some additional examples or recommendations or suggestions if you have them.
Yeah.
So here we are, stage 1, inclusion safety. We're trying to get better, right? We're trying to create a deeply inclusive environment. So let's take a look at some examples. And we've just lifted these. We've just taken them directly from the behavioral guide. So this is like the first page for stage 1. And it just gives you some examples of what the behaviors are. So number 1, teach inclusion as a human need and right. What we say in the book is that inclusion safety is not earned, it is owed. All you have to do is be human and not present others with harm. It is something that you are owed. You are entitled to it. We do not apply a worthiness test to inclusion. we apply a worth test. And because you're human, you have intrinsic and inherent worth. There's no worthiness test with stage 1 inclusion. So we teach it as a human need and right. And then let's get really practical, Junior. Take a look at introduce yourself at the first opportunity. This is very practical.
How
Be
many of us
proactive and introduce yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
how many of us have not done that? I do this more often than I'd like to admit, where I don't introduce myself. And then the next day, it's a little bit more awkward because I saw the person and I didn't introduce myself. And then 2 weeks later, we still see each other, but I don't know that person's name and they don't know who I am.
Yeah.
And so there are very basic things that we can do. And again, admittedly, it does require some vulnerability, which is why I think some of us don't take that step, even on some of these very basic things. And I
Yeah.
include myself, right?
Yeah.
But we have to understand that the 4 stages are sequential in many respects. And
Yeah.
unless we build that inclusion safety, it's going to be difficult for us later on when we try to make gains in the other stages.
It's
And
very
so
true.
it's so fundamental that off the bat, we
Yeah.
do everything that we can to build this out.
And they're, yeah, as Junior said, they're cumulative. Take a look at number 3. Learn people's names and how to pronounce them. Right? Nothing is more personal than a name.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know how to pronounce it, just ask. And may I even make another suggestion? Write it down. It's awkward and it's just not good when a person comes back and mispronounces your name over and over again. And it's right. And we can do better than that. So that's just a very concrete behavior. Another one, and this one comes out of the MIT Human Dynamics Lab based on their sociometric research. Physically face people when you are communicating with them. Have you ever, and what they're doing is they're showing the distinction between if I'm like this, right? I'm looking at you and I'm talking to you. But what they have found is that if I turn my entire body and I face you and I focus on you, what am I communicating? The signal is very clear. I'm giving you my full attention. I'm interested in what you have to say. I'm acknowledging you. That's a simple behavior and yet so important to create inclusion safety.
I also want to call that out for virtual, right?
Yeah.
We're in a unique situation. And so I would love if you guys could throw some things in the chat that you have found to be helpful to be inclusive in a virtual setting. I think what Tim is saying about physically facing people in the research that's come out is also applicable in a digital scenario. If you see me right now talking to you, and I'm looking at the camera and I'm using my hands and my body language and I'm facing you,
Yeah.
that's very different than if I'm staring at another monitor and I'm kind of back here, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that is totally applicable.
So the first thing that people are saying, Junior, is just camera on, right?
Oh, huge.
Just,
yeah, and totally,
like,
we understand that it's
yeah.
not always necessary, but wow,
Yeah.
what a difference.
Yeah, it does. Okay, let's keep going. And what we're doing is we're pulling concrete behaviors from the behavioral guide. We can't possibly go through all 140 of them, but these are some that we thought we would call out. So for example, create communicating rituals. Every team's different. Every social unit's different, but create some rituals that you can do over and over again that reinforce inclusiveness, right? Whatever it is. Okay, so that's another one. I'm going to go to some others. Okay, from another page. Make yourself available and interruptible. Everybody's busy. We're all busy, but go to some extra effort to be available and interruptible. Don't flaunt perks or status symbols. Nobody likes that. The perks and status symbols, those are just artifacts that the organization gives you. Congratulations. We're happy for you, but okay, we get it. Let's move on. Let's connect at a human level and let's include each other. Follow through on small commitments. when you follow through on a very small commitment, it's an acknowledgement of the person, right? Sweating the small stuff is an expression that you respect and value others. So that's just an example. Okay.
So we've got about 70 chats on that last one on inclusion in
Wow.
digital age. And so make sure that you guys scroll through those. I saw a lot of good ones. Not texting on video calls, putting your location in your Zoom name. A lot of really good stuff in there.
I like Karen's, Junior. She says create virtual bonding session where you're not going to talk about work, right?
Yeah. I like that.
I
That's
like it.
cool. It could be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to be able to do that. We have to maintain a sense of community. We have to maintain social cohesion in a virtual distributed environment. It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
It's just not easy for anybody to do. Okay. A few more for inclusion safety. Stage 1, forbid personal attacks. This is out of bounds, right? The way we maintain inclusion safety is that we patrol the boundaries of respect. Always. We don't let criticism get personal. We just don't do that. That's out of bounds. Why? Because inclusion safety is a human right. It's owed, not earned. That's why we don't do that. That's just out of bounds. We call timeout. That's a yellow card. So you get a yellow card for that every time. Okay. So we won't go through all of them, but yeah, another one, remove sarcasm. Sarcasm can be very dangerous. So we have to be careful. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we're not talking about coddling. We're not talking about overprotection, because we can overcorrect and then people can't even communicate or collaborate or share. We're not advocating that. We're just advocating basic civility and respect and engagement and validation. We have hard jobs to do. We have hard problems to solve. So we can't go too far and politicize the process. That's not gonna work. Okay, so let's go to stage 2, learner safety. Let's review the definition. Learner safety satisfies the basic human need to learn and grow. You feel safe in the learning process, asking questions, giving and receiving feedback, experimenting, and even making mistakes. So how do you do that? Let me start with a summary statement about how to do it. So number 1, model it. Model the vulnerability of learning. We all bring some inhibition and some anxiety and some fear into the learning process. Welcome to the human family. That's what we do. So if we can model this, number 1, number 2, encourage others in the learning process, and 3, protect them in the learning process. That will help. So let's go to some specific examples, some specific concrete behaviors from the behavioral guide. Here's the first one. Make learning a collaboration, not a competition, right? When it becomes competitive, then what do people do? They bow out. It's not a competition. This never works, right? Learning should not be a divisive competition, right? And I won't read through everything. It's all in the behavioral guide and you all have access to it. But I think this is very important to create this environment, this vibe, this work environment where you have a learning culture that is collaborative. Junior, anything to add here?
Yeah, I have a question. I think a lot about the teachers in my life, and I'd be interested in your perspective, everyone. If you want to put in the chat, you don't have to name them, you can if you like, but what one of maybe your favorite teachers has done or did to create learner safety for you. Because I think as we look back, there are these formative experiences that we've had in the learning process. I know I have absolutely had some. even back to my 5th grade elementary school teacher, I
Mm,
can think of things that that particular person did to increase learner safety and help me engage in the learning process when
mhm.
I may have had some inhibition. I can think of high school teachers, university professors. So I'm going to go ahead and read a few of these. They ask questions as well and don't come across as a know-it-all.
These are awesome.
I love these. Curiosity was valued. They gamified things. They helped them understand, David, that learning is real work. They focused on strengths, encouraged curiosity again, Stacy, but with support. So
Yeah.
I'm getting some interesting patterns in here. As Tim said in inclusion safety, it's not coddling. And I'm seeing that a lot of pattern in these comments that a lot of these teachers challenged you, but
Yeah.
with support in the right way, with encouragement. These are
Yeah.
great.
These are fantastic.
Yeah. Questioning authority and curiosity were my biggest lessons. Reward openly and publicly when something is done right. Provide encouragement when mistakes happen. Karen was helped up when she fell down.
Yeah.
We can still have fun, tease, and joke. These are great. Challenge the
Fantastic.
process. So think about all of these things that have been done by other people toward you, and then
Yeah.
think of the opportunity that you have to provide these types of experiences to other people. Because as Tim often says, and as we all acknowledge, people bring a lot of inhibition to the learning process.
Yeah.
As we talk about risk, we're at the next level of vulnerability now when we're talking about learning. And it's not just that learning is a vulnerable thing when you're young, it's a vulnerable thing your entire life.
Yeah. It doesn't change in adulthood.
No?
One of the case studies that I give in the book is about this high school calculus teacher, and I went in and did classroom observation, interviewed some of the students, interviewed the teacher. It was incredible what this gentleman does. He disconnects fear from failure and mistakes in the classroom environment. It's absolutely unbelievable. It's a case study that you may want to learn more about. It's incredible. Okay, here's another one. Junior, let's go to this one. Encourage your private and public learners. This is an interesting concept. Some of your people, and you have to study the learning disposition and learning patterns of your people. Some of your people will be more public learners. They like to learn verbally. They like to learn with other people. They like to learn out loud. Others are more private learners, and they need their time to reflect and to process. You need to understand the learning dispositions of your colleagues. And if you're in a leadership role, it's even more important, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to think about these patterns. Private learners prefer quiet, focused isolation, at least for a time. Okay.
And I think that we can all agree that we learn differently.
We do.
We
Yeah.
all know that. And so if that's so obvious to us, then it should be relatively obvious to us as well that we need to teach differently depending
Right.
on who's in front of us, right?
Yeah. And then we engage with them a little bit differently.
Yep.
We understand a little bit differently. Here's another one. Invite others to think beyond their roles. I want you to think about that. this this is an invitation, right? We're inviting people. You act in your role, but we have to learn to think beyond our roles. And if you give people permission and an invitation to do that, it opens up new horizons for them and it accelerates learning. Any comments, Junior, on this?
I think so. If we look at down in the 20s, we need team members who can get up in their hot air balloons and see the big picture. What do we mean by that? The 2020s is today different than a decade ago or
Yeah,
2 decades ago?
yeah,
What does the learning relationship have to do with the volatility of our environment? It means that we need to learn faster and better and more efficiently. And so this becomes an increasingly big part of our roles.
yeah. So here's a concept for you, and maybe Ben, you can put this in the chat box. The concept is learning agility. Here's the definition. Learning agility is the ability to learn at or above the speed of change. At or above the speed of change. And that's what's required of all of us now, right? I mean, it really is. Okay, let's go to stage 3, contributor safety. Contributor safety satisfies the basic human need to make a difference. You feel safe to use your skills and abilities to offer a meaningful contribution. So how do we do this? Well, there's a pattern here, a very consistent pattern in the way that people encourage contributor safety with each other. Number 1, explain the why. The why taps motivation. Number 2, assign the what. You do this, I'll do that. We divide up our work. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, delegate the how. Right? Let's put a figure it out factor in there. Let's give people discretion. Let's give them autonomy. Let's give them independence. Let's give them creativity as much as we can. Now, we still have to manage risk, right? That's part of our obligation. But to the extent possible, let's delegate the how. So that's the overarching suggestion for increasing contributor safety. Let's take a look at some concrete behaviors. I want to talk about this first one because I believe this is a global best practice. Rotate the conducting of meetings. And I'd love to get your feedback on this, but we've been working with many organizations and they're implementing this and the results are incredible. They're astounding. So traditionally, the leader conducts the meeting, right? But if you rotate that assignment, your team members will gain greater confidence to contribute. And you'll find that the dynamics change. And if you're in a leadership position, by the way, you can take a step back and you can dual monitor the team dynamics and the content better than if you were conducting yourself. So it's going to be a benefit to you and it's going to be a benefit to the team, members of the team. So I want you to think about that. That's one that we've been really emphasizing lately, and the benefits have been really huge. Junior, comments?
Yeah, so if you'll go back one slide, one of the things that I've found to be incredibly helpful is to look at yourself, analyze your behavior, and ask yourself which one of these needs the most improvement as far as you're concerned. This is super helpful to me as I go through, okay, explain the why, assign the what, delegate the how. Which one am I weakest in? Which one could I benefit most from implementing better? And so I'd encourage all of you to do that. Identify which one you could make some gains in, and then identify 1 or 2 solid behaviors that you can then go implement today. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's the right way to do it. Start with that personal assessment at that level. I like that. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Let's share a few more. I like this one too. Number 9, share your work style and communication preferences.
Yeah.
If you think about it, most of the time we're not explicit about this. And often people are not reflective about this to actually think, well, wait a second, what is my work style and what are my communication preferences? And really think through that and then verbalize it and maybe even document it, capture that so that you can share it. And then if you're in a management or leadership role, ask people and just take part of a meeting sometime, right? And say, you know what we're going to do today? We're going to talk about our individual work styles and communication preferences. Now, that may seem a little bit odd, but if we understand each other better when it comes to that, we're going to be more effective. So I'll start with me. Let me share with you what I think now, and I'd be interested in your feedback, but I want to share what I think is my work style and my communication preferences. And then you let each person on the team do that. It's incredible how that helps.
I've seen that make tremendous difference with my team and how I engage with my team. as I better understand their preferences. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it's so helpful. I work, so one of the teams, two of the teams that I manage, a graphic design team and a development team. And I have a couple developers on this team that love to work in the middle of the night for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
so when I finally understood, like, okay, 12 to 3 a.m. is like your productive gold time,
Yeah.
that helped me,
Yeah.
right?
They're owls and you didn't know it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So those are things that we need to know. And in this pandemic environment with just virtual teams, it's very important, but we have to be explicit. Right. We have to talk about these things more directly. And then it really accelerates our progress as a team. Okay. Um, just a couple more. Approach failure with curiosity rather than criticism. Oftentimes, our initial response is not good, and we don't even understand the nature of the failure, right? We haven't done root cause analysis. We don't even know. So it's just really good sound advice to approach it with curiosity first and try to suspend your judgment, be more dispassionate when it comes to this. And I think that will help. Okay. All right, let's go to stage 4, challenger safety. Oh, this is the fun one, guys. This is where we are really put to the test as members of the team. Here's the definition. Challenger safety satisfies the basic human need to make things better. You feel safe to speak up and challenge the status quo when you think there's a need or opportunity to improve. So how do you do this? Here's the general guidance. Here's the general advice. Number 1, increase intellectual friction. That's your raw material. Number 2, decrease social friction. Here's a visual to help you see this a little better. The intellectual friction is your raw material. This is how we solve problems. This is how we create solutions. This is how we innovate. Challenger safety is the realm of innovation. This is where we do amazing things. And so we need intellectual friction to go very, very high. We need creative abrasion. We need constructive dissent. We need ideas that are colliding. We need hard-hitting dialogue and debate. Okay, but what happens when you start to do that? Well, there's a tendency for the social friction to go up at the same time. And that's pretty normal and natural. Why? Because we're human. We're sensitive. We have points of view. We have opinions. We may feel a vested interest in the status quo. And so if someone takes it on, we get defensive, right? Because we had a hand in building the status quo. So this is not an easy thing to do. This is the hardest thing to do. So how do we do it? Here's some concrete suggestions, behaviors. Number 1, take your finger off the fear button. Oh man, this is where it starts, right? What did we say at the very beginning? If you push the fear button, you trigger the self-censoring instinct. People begin to withdraw, right? They pull back and they hold back and they change their behavior. And so that's where we start. That's where we start. Junior, any comments?
No, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, weigh in last. Guys, this one is huge. Speaking first when you hold positional power softly censors your team. I love that first line. Is this not true? So if you're in a managerial role or in any role, let's say you usually go first, try to usually go last, or
Yeah,
just switch it up for a week and see what happens. Because you can ice your team when you give your opinion too quickly, especially if that's been the pattern in the past. If you come through as authoritative or too decisive at the beginning and you put your opinion out there, then the other team members may say, okay, that's it. The issue's been decided. I'm going to back away.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So let the issue develop, let the conversation happen, and then come in with your opinion. It's huge.
yeah. Let's remember that when it comes to stage 4 challenger safety, this is the realm of innovation. Your enemy is groupthink, right? The homogenization of thought is your enemy. That's the last thing you need. You need people to challenge. And so you need to be able to give a license to disagree. Issue that license. It's so very important. Couple more. Break before breakdowns. Now, this is a very important one. So let me just read a little bit. When interpersonal dynamics start breaking down, immediately take a break, right? You got to take a break. You can see there's some escalation. You can see people are getting fired up, a little bit too fired up. They're getting a little emotional, right? And so the social friction is rising. So we just got to call a timeout. We got to take a break. We got to decompress, and then we can come back. So think about your renewal cycle with the team and monitor your social friction. So take a break before breakdowns. It's a very good best practice that I hope that you'll find some value in.
Excellent. So we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. I want you to hang around for the end because we're going to tell you how you can run the 4 stages team survey for free with your intact team. We're going to be choosing a few people, so hang out.
Yep. Last one, model the art of disagreement. You have to be able to model having marvelous disagreements where the intellectual friction is super high and you keep the social friction down on the ground. You have to model that. So that's the last one that I'll call out there. Okay. We're going to do a wrap up. So what is psychological safety? Can you remember? 5 words. Let me give you a hint. An environment of what? Put it in the chat box. An environment of, who can remember? Reward. There we go. Thanks, Douglas. Rewarded vulnerability. That's what psychological safety is. When you create this kind of environment, watch out because you will unleash the power of your team. So I want you, I hope that you will take that away and you'll remember those 5 words. Psychological safety is an environment of rewarded vulnerability. And I hope that you'll be able to move your team from inclusion safety to learner safety to contributor safety to challenger safety. All the way. That's the journey that you're on. Okay. So with that, Junior, you want to talk about giveaways, other things?
Yes, I do. So I've shared my screen with you now, and you can see our website. I wanted to share a few things with you. A lot of you on the webinar with us today are new. We do these webinars very frequently, and we did a webinar series just a little while back in September on the 4 stages of psychological safety, and we spent an entire webinar on each of the 4 stages. So I would highly encourage you, if you want to learn a little bit more about each of these stages, to go to leaderfactor.com, go to the blog, and you can see each of these, the webinar recordings, as well as time-stamped explanations of all the slides that we go through. It's very comprehensive. And so if you want to do a deeper dive on the 4 stages, go ahead and go here. It's a great place to go. Another thing I wanted to point out, we offer certifications for the 4 stages of psychological safety that allow you to run the content and workshop of 4 stages, as well as become an admin in the 4 stages team survey platform. So if you're interested in becoming certified, we just released one more session that we're going to do before the end of the year. This is the last one. So December 10th, 10 to 1 p.m. Mountain, go to this page, leaderfactor.com/certifications to learn a little bit more about the cert. Now, last thing, I wanted to show you the team survey. This is a state-of-the-art platform. Everything is developed in-house, and we use the 4 stages model applied to the intact team to get a baseline read on where we are and then monitor progress over time. So you'll see that participants receive an invitation that looks like this. They get a 12-item survey that takes about 5 minutes to complete. And then all of the data is aggregated for you in dashboard format with an overall score, stage averages based on the breakout that we described in the webinar, question averages, rank ordered by score, filterable by stage, top 3 opportunities, recommendations, results over time, open-ended feedback. We also have learning resources like the behavioral guide inside the platform, along with aggregate reporting for organizations, action planning, a lot of really cool things that you can do inside the platform. It's $25 per respondent. I know we got a couple of chats in there. So if you've got a team of 10, $250 and so on. So if you would like an opportunity to take the 4 stages with your team, you can enter to win a free license for your team, up to 15 participants. We'd like you to post on LinkedIn, tag Leader Factor about your experience on the webinar, and then share a link that Ben will put in the chat. We'll also give you the details that will, Ben's got them in the chat. So go ahead and take a look at that. The certification, I would highly recommend. We run them about twice a month, and this is the last one of the year. So everyone, if you've hung around this long, thank you. We want to say thank you for spending an hour of your time with us. Time is valuable, and the fact that you've chosen to spend it with us today means a lot to us. These are important concepts that the world needs today.
Junior, one more thing, and Ben, put it in the chat box, the link to, so we published an article in HBR, Harvard Business Review, last week that focuses on stage 4, Challenger safety. I think you'll find that interesting and relevant and helpful as you're working with your own teams. So take a look at that article. It's just another resource to help you in your journey.
Excellent. And with that, best of luck in your journey, and we will see you on the next Leader Factor webinar. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.